Welcome back, everybody. This week we have yet another very special guest for you all. Welcome to the show, Jason Inman. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Hey, yeah, no problem. You are the 201st episode, so
I'll take it.
Yeah, congrats to that. We're started, 200 more episodes. So, yeah, thanks for being on. And we want to talk about your Kickstarter, obviously, super best friend. But before we do that, we always like to do a little bit of an origin story. So, yeah, can you just paint that for us? What got you into comics? Were you always reading comics at a young age? I mean, clearly from the wall behind you, you're not a fan at all, right? I mean,
I think it's a goofy medium.
Yeah.
And honestly, why do they make so many toys? I just don't understand.
Yeah, none of us buy
When are they ever going to stop?
Yeah.
Who is buying them?
I know.
I don't understand this. It makes no sense.
Throwing money at these people?
I scoff every time I see. No. Obviously, it's a giant joke. If you're listening to the audio version of this, my wall is full of Star Trek and Justice League and Age of Apocalypse action figures. So my origin story for comic books is very much I kind of basically got into comic books because of the death of Superman. Because I saw the graphic novel of the full collection. I'd heard about it on the news, and I read the graphic novel, and it was the first time that I ever realized that you could have a shared continuity, that you could have Wonder Woman was connected to Batman. Batman was connected to Superman, and it kind of made me want to deep dive into DC continuity and figure out all that stuff, because I didn't know that before. I'd only seen Batman 1989, and Superman wasn't there, and I've seen Batman 66. Superman wasn't there, but when they were all at his funeral, it like cracked my brain in half, and that really led me into discovering like Green Lantern Kyle Rayner and Grant Morrison's Justice League and Age of Apocalypse and all these kind of things that kind of took my hand and guided me deeper into the mythology.
Mm-hmm. And at some point you were kind of like, I have my own stories to tell.
I've always written stuff. It's all about, like, I think it's like creating anything, right? It's where is the courage? Where do you find the courage to pull the trigger? Like every decision you ever make in your life. And for me to make comic books, it took a little bit longer. Because before then I'd written lots of short films, I'd written screenplays. I wrote a one act play that went to the Kennedy Theater Arts Festival. But specifically for comic books, and working with a comic book artist, there was a little bit of an intimidation factor there.
Okay. How so? Just you like that, because you're drawing your idea or something like that, or
because basically you have to, you have advantages as a writer in any of the other mediums, right? With a screenplay, you're just like, you don't have to shoot the damn thing, unless you're writing a short film. So I can say the mountain is 2,000 feet tall and figure it out VFX.
Animate that shit.
But with comic books, you have to be able to explain it enough to an artist that if an artist is looking at panel 1 or page 1, panel 3, that the artist is like, is there 70 people in this panel or 2? And are they in casual or are they dressed up? Which way are they facing? What time of the day is it? It is all these details that in a screenplay or even a novel, that is stuff you can leave up to the imagination of the reader. You can leave it to the imagination of, you can be like, this is the art director's problem. That ain't my problem. I don't care what they wear. But for a comic book script, you have to lay it all out. Now, it depends on, like, whether you're writing Marvel Method, or I've never written Marvel Method because I've always asked artists, because Marvel Method is way easier for the writer.
Yeah.
Every artist I've ever talked to that I've wanted to work with has been like, don't write. Give me the script. Put it full panel. I don't want to worry about that. Like, because they have to do a lot more, they're already carrying so much of the weight. So for me, is the intimidation factor of, you have to plan out a lot more of a comic book script than you have to in other mediums.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's interesting too, because like we talk about comic books as a medium and pretty relative to cinema, because you almost have like a cinematography of like, where's the shot being angled from and taken from for each panel and stuff like that too.
Yeah. A lot of that is the artist though.
Yeah.
A lot of that, and if you have a really good artist, they do that subconsciously. You know, I try not to tell camera angles in my scripts unless I have a specific vision of like, this is what it's going to look like. And I've had this in my head forever, and please do it this way. But most of the time, just leave that to the artist, because that's where the artist your collaborators can bring their strength, and that is where the artist can bring a lot of flavor to it, because comic books are in a lot of ways more collaborative than some of the other mediums. Like, I've always heard the idea of if all you want to do is write and you don't want to touch anything else, then you should be a novelist, because it's the only medium in terms of writing where people aren't going to screw with you.
Yeah,
you know, you type the words, you turn it in, you're done.
Yeah.
Whereas like television and movies, you've got to work with other people. Like, you've got to work with a director. The director can carry a lot of the weight. So can the cinematographer. But a writer in comic books, especially independent comic books, you are suddenly the project manager, thinking of it in terms of house construct. You are the project manager for the entire comic book. If the comic book doesn't get done in terms of indie comics, that's on you. And that's a whole different ballgame, right? You know, it's more than a writer. You have to make sure that there's continuity. You have to make sure that it becomes a business. Make it an independent comic book, you know?
Yeah, right.
You know, and for a lot of people, and I have shades of this a lot too, where you're like, I don't want to run a business. If I wanted to, I would have gone to college for business management. Right. I wanted to write.
Yeah, right. I just want to make this cool thing. I don't want to have to, like, you know, manage all these people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure. And along the way, I mean, like, especially you probably worked with several different artists too, and some are, that's probably easier than others, or like you have a better relationship with some than you know, people that you've worked with in the past, right? I mean, it's not the same for everyone.
No, it's different for every collaborator. No artist works the same. No artist hits the deadlines the same, but that's the excitement, and that's the total interesting part of it. What was that?
Chris has had, he rolled his eyes because he's had some experiences with that in the past too, of, you know, deadlines with artists and stuff like that.
I've published one of my comics, and I've been working on other ones, and I love artists. They do a lot of work, but sometimes they make me, I'm surprised I still have hair.
You know, I love working with comic artists, because I will say this, that when they will sometimes add something to your vision that you would never have considered,
100%.
and bring some things into it. But I think every comic book writer knows that, like, there's a certain personality type that becomes a comic book artist. And like, every comic book writer will know exactly what I'm saying. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but just the way that their brain operates, you're like, you're a comic book artist, aren't you?
Well, it's something that through doing the show, we've learned, and hopefully have presented to our audience very effectively, that you're not just a guy who draws pretty pictures. You're like you said, you're a cinematographer. You're in charge of where the actors are, how they move, where they go. You have to be able to follow that old zigzag pattern that they talk about in, like, old Marvel, how to read comics books and all that kind of stuff. Like, you're more than just a guy who draws pretty pictures. And that's unique to, like, a comic artist, as opposed to, like, somebody who literally is an artist and paints a pretty picture.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I guess let's just talk about, because I really do like the art for Super Best Friend. I think it fits the story, or like kind of the style of what you're going for. So give us the pitch for what is Super Best Friend? What is this?
Well, first I got to give the shout out, speaking of comic book artists, to George Kemadais, who is the artist.
Okay. Awesome.
But Super Best Friend is it's basically what if the world's greatest superhero, had a best friend who live streamed all of his adventures. And this is a story of Maddie Moore, who's best friends with Captain Terrific, who's the world's greatest superhero in my story. And he runs a live streaming channel called Super Best Friend, hence the title.
Okay.
He's famous. Villains hate him because, you know, he's friends with those superheroes. And one day he accidentally reveals his best friend's secret identity live on the air. And it creates a whole bunch of complications for the story going forward. I say that this is the journey for Maddie Moore of going from a super fan to a superhero. And it looks at online fandom. It looks like a lot of it is like my story told through the lens of the super world of superheroes, of like covering the world. Basically, I spent 3.5 years of my life basically talking about nothing but superheroes for DC Comics, and a lot of that is streamed and filtered through this story.
Right. Okay. Wow. And something a little, I mean, this is very relevant to today, where it's like everything's being streamed or recorded and put on the internet, like life events that are like, it's like, I don't know, my puppy's second birthday. Okay, let's put it on. And it's like, and some of that's good, but also there's probably bad things that come of that, like you said, like identity being revealed and the complications behind that and stuff. So is that, it's almost like a modern day Jimmy Olsen or something like that, right? Okay.
It's 100% like, it's very inspired by Jimmy Olsen and Superman. But it's also takes a lot of shades of Foggy Nelson and Daredevil.
Okay.
Matty Moore is actually much closer to Foggy Nelson than he is Jimmy Olsen.
I like that.
And he's a very energetic, very public, but he doesn't think he has a lot of life skills, and he doesn't think that he can contribute a lot to the world, which is the reason why he's obsessed with superheroes. And the big lesson he's going to learn in this story is that he just has different skills. He can't punch the moon,
right?
But he can bring a lot of awareness to issues that people wouldn't even think about just by making a video about it.
I like that. Yeah, it's like he has his own powers of just making people aware of things.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Like the power of information, almost.
Well, it's a power, like just like with you guys' podcast, it's the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
If you guys talk about a comic book that nobody's heard about before, then suddenly you have just informed a group of people about, like, oh, I've never heard of that book before.
Right.
So it's that same type of issue. Like Matty has that same type of power, but he doesn't see it as a power, and it's the idea of learning for him. Because he is surrounded by people that are extraordinary, people that are basically gods. And so for him, it is very much an issue of, well, if I don't have laser beams coming at my eyes, what can I even contribute to the world?
So don't compare yourself to the person next to you. Look at your own strengths, kind of idea.
Yeah, basically, like everybody has something to contribute to the world. And for Matty, it's a lot of the lessons he's going to learn is all he should be doing just talking about superheroes, or can he actually make a difference in the world? Can he actually change the world? And this is like the lesson that kicks him out the front door. This is Frodo finding the ring. Suddenly he's revealed his best friend's identity, and he has to put it back or he has to fix the solution. He's basically ruined his best friend's life.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I think it's an interesting premise that you've taken here.
Thank you.
And I mean, we talked about the art too. The art style fit. I mean, it almost reminds me of like a Invincible style, like the color scheme and everything. And I really like it. I think it works well for, I don't know, like you have the preview of the page open too. And I really like the way the panels are laid out and stuff like that. It just flows nicely. And so let's talk about what you have you're funded right now, but we still need donations, right? So you're talking to us a little bit about that. Just because it's already funded doesn't mean that you can't get more out of the project by adding to it.
Well,
right?
I always say that if a project is funded, that doesn't mean you shouldn't donate to it, especially in terms of crowdfunding, because you don't know what the actual cost for anybody is. The one thing I say about if a project's already funded is that it's consider it a pre-order. You're definitely going to get the thing now.
Right.
So it's the most sure crowdfunding thing you have if you're donating to a funded campaign. But I give this advice a lot because I've run several Kickstarters now, several successful Kickstarters, and I always say that Kickstarter is a little weird because it's to me it's like a game of roulette. It's a gamble, because when people come to your page, they look at your product and they're like, okay, I either like it, yes, no. If they say yes, then they will look at, well, how much are they asking for?
Yeah.
And based on what the number is, this person will make a determination, yes or no, whether they're going to donate. Because if your number is too high, that person will automatically, they'll never fund. Forget it. Not
Right.
even gonna waste my time.
Right. Yeah.
But if the number's low enough, they'll be like, oh, okay, I think they'll fund. Yes. Click,
Right.
click.
Right.
And that is such a weird policy, but that is true. So I always advise people where I say, when you're creating your Kickstarter, and I did this for Super Best Friend, I asked for $7,000, but the break even was 9. But I was willing to be like, okay, well, if we only get 7, I'm willing to put $2,000 of my own money into my idea to keep it going, because I believe in the idea enough. And I always say that to people when you're planning that number, because I thought, I was like, okay, I'm for certain, I think I can get $7,000. I'm pretty certain I can get $7,000. Right. I wasn't certain whether I could get 9. Now, looking at the campaign now, I was like, oh yeah, I could have gotten 9, but I didn't know that before, because it's always a gamble.
Right.
So I always say that to people where I'm like, yeah, just because it's funded doesn't mean, because the more I'm putting everything of this into the next issue of Super Best Friend. This is for issue 1, and I'm planning on running 2 more Kickstarters. Okay. And I've always said that the more we overfund, that just means with the next Kickstarter, the cheaper the comic becomes. Because I don't need to set my prices are basically set, or the tiers are basically set on using the funds to make the next 2 issues. Okay. And the more of that I have before I even do the Kickstarter, the cheaper and cheaper I will make the issue on the Kickstarter. You know, because if everything goes well and we overfund on all 3, because there's going to be 3 Kickstarters, will be one for issue 1, issue 2, issue 3. They're all 48-page comic books. Hopefully by the time we get to issue 3, when I do the issue 3 Kickstarter campaign, that comic is cheap, really cheap.
Yeah.
And
great.
The dirty
not free. That's not how Kickstarter works, but cheap.
Not free. No. Yeah.
And the dirty little secret is that, you know, you're making something, you're putting it out there because you love the art and you love what you're doing, but it'd be nice to make some money too.
Yes. Well, I will say on this campaign, Super Best Friend 1, I'm not taking a page rate at all.
Yeah.
All of the money is going to printing the comic book for the backers and to go to the next issue. You know, and to make the next 48-page issue. You know, because I actually created Super Best Friend for my Patreon a couple years ago, and it's been me and George have been making it over the last 2 years, just very, very easy, lackadaisical pace. And, you know, last year I kind of thought, well, I should throw this Kickstarter, and if Kickstarter goes for it, I'll make the next 2 issues. And if Kickstarter doesn't go for it, then I'll move on to the next project. Now I've always had this, because I'm a big believer in know what your ending is before you write anything. So, I know for anybody out there listening, be like, well, he doesn't even know where this book's going. And I'm like, no, I know exactly what the last scene is. I've known it for a very long time. I'm actually very excited that it looks like it's going to become a reality because of the Kickstarter campaign, which is great. You know, but, I didn't put a lot of, there's a rule that Robert Kirkman, I heard him say on a podcast a long, long time ago. And this podcast host asked Robert Kirkman, they were like, well, you got a lot of first issues. You have a lot of series that have first issues, but they don't have issue 2. And his immediate response was, why would I write issue 2 if issue 1 didn't sell? I moved on to the next thing. And I have always onboarded that, where I'm like, why would you make 50 issues of a series that nobody buys?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That makes no sense at all. I mean, it's a business strategy too.
Exactly.
Right.
So I was always like, this was the season 1 green light basically for Super Best Friend. If the Kickstarter campaign went on, then I'd be like, all right, cool. Then you're going to get the whole first season of Super Best Friend. But if it didn't, I was gonna be like, well, I got plenty of other comic book ideas. I got a book called Silversmith I've been working on. That's the next one.
Yeah. Just line that one up.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, it's really cool. So you have a plan to do more than just this issue. So how many issues total were you looking at?
Right now, Super Best Friend it'll be 3 issues that are all 48 pages. So you consider this to be like act 1 of Super Best Friend. But I've designed all the characters. You're going to meet a lot of ancillary characters in Super Best Friend. And while Super Best Friend is like very much the story of Captain Terrific and Maddie, you will meet some other heroes, you'll meet some other villains, and I've made backstories for all of them that they could all be spun off. So this could be like a bigger sort of superhero meta universe. But again, I'm leaving that to, that's one of the things I love about Kickstarter. is I'm putting the ideas out there. If Kickstarter goes for it and the audience, the direct audience, is amazed by it, then I'll continue it. I'll keep it going.
Yeah,
you know,
that makes sense. I mean, yeah, it was funded in 11 hours, right? So
yes, yeah, which was a big like, whew.
Yeah. And it's kind of you just wait for it after that, but
yeah. Well, you still got to do a lot more work. Like Kickstarters are don't let anybody kid you. Kickstarters are a full-time job on top of, and I have a full-time job on top of this. So the first week was pretty busy. And yeah, I could relax a little bit more as we went on because I was like, well, okay, we are funded. I'll chill out a little bit more. I know some people go full bore the entire campaign, and I just don't have enough energy for that.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people, and you know this, but a lot of people don't know that behind the scenes of any Kickstarter, you can see all the traffic. Kickstarter gives you a lot of like meta material in there. And that first day, or usually first couple days, you hope for, you see big spikes and people funding and blah blah blah. But then there's just like that lull.
Oh yeah,
that drives creators crazy because you're sitting there going like, well, why the fuck aren't they doing anything?
Yeah, I always say to creators, like, your first 5 days are always going to be your biggest days, and then usually your last 3. Because in your last 3, Kickstarter kicks you out to other projects, being like, this one's ending soon. Hey,
yeah, right. Hey.
Also, a lot of people I've noticed over doing the campaigns, there's a notify button. So if you come to a project live and if you don't donate to it, you can click this notify button. And as it's counting down, Kickstarter will like email you every week and be like, "Hey, you click notify. You ever gonna pay up? What's going on here?"
Yeah.
And it does that for the last 3 days, which is why a lot of people that click that notify button, oh yeah, I was gonna. Oh, okay, here I come on the last day. But yes, that is a thing. Usually about week 2 or week 3. Some campaigns I've had this, and some campaigns I haven't. You will have a day where you literally get no pledges. Now, some campaigns I've been able to avoid that. Super Best Friend, I had a 0 day. I just couldn't avoid it, and it only happened because somebody adjusted their pledge. Like somebody canceled their pledge, which is fine. It happens all the time. No worries. Yeah. But it like set me to like no new pledges that day, and I was like, no. But some Kickstarter creators get really upset by that, and you just have to. It happens. It happens on every Kickstarter. Week 2, week 3, it feels like nobody cares about your campaign.
Yeah.
I see it in some chat groups I'm in with other like creators, and they just, what do I do for that second week? Joel is like, you muscle through. You try to do some interviews. You try to pimp it out as much as you can, but at the end of the day, it's just part of the problem.
I don't have a solution for it either, and I don't have a good strategy for it. And I've tried lots of different things, and I've never been able to correlate anything. I just keep plugging along, and I always try to be like, did I get a new pledge today? Cool. Even if it was only one. Right. Even if it was only one new backer, that's a win.
Yeah. And I know I'm going to be back in it tonight, so at least you'll get one today.
All right, thank you. No 0 day for today.
Yeah, it's funny because so I don't forget. Like I'll do it at the end of the interview, and like the interview will be over, and someone will be like, "Oh, Chris will be checking the number," and it'll be like, "Mike, the number just went up. Did you back it?" I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." That was me. You caught me.
Well, that's the other advantage of. That's why I say Kickstarter, like doing podcast interviews like this one is always even if you only get one backer from doing a podcast interview, and Michael, I'm going to hold you to this.
Oh, yep.
I will, hey, it's a win.
Yeah. Right. So now I'm under a scope. So I got to do it. Chris, you should probably do it too. I don't know if you have, but no pressure.
I'm not weeks ago, Mike.
Yeah, I know. I'm one of the people that does the notify me thing that pops up.
Oh, that's you, huh?
You're talking about. They have that button there for me.
Look, I'm also not here to put a gun to your head to be like, back my campaign.
No, there's been some interviews that I haven't backed the campaigns, but I won't tell you which ones. So you guys can.
That's a good call. That's the secret between an amateur podcaster and a professional podcaster. See, you don't name names. You just say like, you're like, well, I'm considering backing your campaign, or I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
and then If you never do it, it's whatever. Hey,
Yeah, it's whatever. But
doesn't
you know,
matter.
in the end. So I guess.
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't hold.
Yeah.
I never presume what somebody's financial situation is when I do a Kickstarter. You know, my main level for the book is $20. It's $20 to get the book and get some other stuff. And I realize, because I've been there plenty of times in my life, that sometimes $20 in a week might be too much. That's a meal for somebody.
Right.
So I'm always, if I always say to people that I see this message a lot, where people are like, oh, I want to back it, but I just don't have the money right now. And the thing I always say is, one, sharing the campaign on any social media is just as important as backing it. It can make a huge difference because you're putting it in front of eyeballs that probably have never heard of my comic book.
Right.
And then the other thing I always say is that I always do a backer kit store that is open after the campaign is over. So a couple months down the road, if you still are interested, come by. It doesn't matter to me either way. Like, I never presume that I'm like, well, it's only $20. Everybody should donate. You know,
right.
Like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Well, I remember this exact conversation like back a little bit under a year ago when we were first in lockdowns and everything. And people were like, well, do I go in and try to do this Kickstarter? I mean, I've been planning for it, but COVID and a lot of people were successful back then, but that was a huge conversation of just like, people are out of work. Like, do we really want to ask them for money for our funny book?
Yeah. I will say exactly. And I will say, I delayed this. I was planning on Super Best Friend happening last year. And I delayed it a couple times because of like kind of COVID things. And I was like, oh boy, and the reason why I launched it in 2021 was because I wanted to. And I'm hoping to maybe be able to do campaign number 2 towards the end of this year, so I can get 2 in this year, so people can have the first 2 issues in 2021. But at this point, I decided to launch it because I was like, we're getting close to the year mark, and this is kind of the new normal. And if I don't launch it now, I probably will never launch it. But after 2020, I think we have to assume that almost every single person in the world has been affected somehow economically by the new reality.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, it's good to see that yours is funded. I mean, and now I want to see the second issue too. So let's hope for the best for that. Usually, you said you've done some Kickstarters in the past. Now, do you see like a trend like with more followers for a second installment or something? Have you done that before?
Yeah. So interesting enough, I can see on this campaign on Super Best Friend. So this is the first time I've ever done a single issue. I've usually come to Kickstarter with full-on graphic novels.
Oh, okay.
And this is the one that I wanted to try to do single issue. I wanted to try to do variant covers. I was very excited about a foil variant cover.
I saw the foil on there.
Oh yeah.
Shiny.
It was one of my stretch goals, man. And I've always wanted to do one. And so this is a lot of Super Best Friend was, I've always wanted to do this, so I'm going to do this. I've always wanted to do a superhero comic book, so here it is. I've always wanted to do a foil cover, here it is.
Yep.
And I basically just, again, I make it very democratic. I'm like, here it is. If you want it, you'll push me to this next stretch goal. If not, well, then guess what? I won't do a full cover. But they wanted it, so hey, we're doing a full cover.
That's awesome.
I went around in circles. I forgot your question.
Yeah, I mean, like, do you see more an uptick in followers?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the Super Best Friend, I can see that most of the backers are people that have backed my previous campaigns.
Awesome. That's really
and cool. I'm getting more pledges from previous backers than I am from outside sources. And it's another thing a tip I say is it's more important on Kickstarter to fund at any amount than to fail. Because Kickstarter is like a snowball.
Right.
For each campaign, your snowball gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. Yeah. And most people, again, like I said, the number, they like to go for the big snowball first. And it's like, no. Even if only you're asking for $1,000, it's more important to get that 1,000. And then for the next campaign, then ask for 5. Then next ask for 10. Then next ask for 15. Like incrementally increase it. Don't go right to 30 grand. Because that's going to trigger that thing where people are like, they're never going to fund.
You can't start at the gates with that.
Yeah. But no, this is, that's one of the things I love it is because like I've built a little bit of an audience on Kickstarter and I can see that they're coming on and I love to do the thing. I like to do fun things I always pack my own Kickstarters. it doesn't matter. Like we packed 700 of them last year for Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio. But I love it because I love seeing the names. Mm-hmm. And if I recognize your name, I will write you a personal message.
Oh, that's cool.
Like I will like because we see the same names. Like we know. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, I've seen that name like 3 or 4 times now. Okay, hey man, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
The little personal touch. That's awesome.
I also love to throw in trading cards. I always buy a set of trading cards, and this one I bought 90s DC superhero set. So I can guarantee you you're either going to get a Star Trek trading card or you're going to get a DC comic book trading card. Funny. You're going to get a random trading card and buckle up.
That's someone's going to end up with like, I don't know, a Blue Beetle from the 90s or something.
I hope so. I just saw that card the other day.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But to me, that's the thing I love about Kickstarter is that there's no middleman. Mm-hmm. You are getting a package literally from my hands to your house.
Right. And that's it's the little personal touch too that does it.
So this only works on video, so sorry audio people, but a coworker years ago was at a random garage sale and he found these. And
I think those are it, man.
Yeah.
These exactly it.
Those are the exact same ones. Yeah.
It's the whole set.
It's amazing.
And he comes into work, he's like, dude, I found these, and here you go. I was like, oh, thank you. I don't want these, but thank you.
I will take I started doing that a couple years ago because I got a Christmas card from a friend 5 or 6 years ago, and they had a random trading card in there. And I asked him, I was like, why did you give us a random trading card? And he was like, well, I have these trading cards. He's like, I buy a new set every year. And he's like, it's just something fun when you open up the Christmas card. You're like, oh, cool. Yeah. And so I started doing that in our Christmas cards.
Oh, nice.
And now I've started doing it for Kickstarters because like when you open your Kickstarter, you're just like, oh, cool. Yeah. Madam Xanadu.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good idea too. It's because it's like, oh, it's a little bit of personal too.
Yeah,
like,
it's it's a little bit of it's a cherry on top, to be like, oh, cool.
That's really cool.
A machine didn't pack this.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Well, I mean, Jason, if we obviously we could send everybody. We'll put a link to the Kickstarter. But if we want everyone to follow like you and what you're doing, where can we send our listeners and viewers?
If you like any of my conversation, the Kickstarter campaign is superbestfriendcomic.com. You can type the URL, and otherwise online, I'm at Twitter and Instagram at Jawin at JAWIIN.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And
thanks, fellas.
We'd love to have you back on when we want to talk about issue 2. This is great. And you're always welcome.
Thank you guys. It was an absolute pleasure. I'd love to come back.
And everybody look in the description down below. You'll get the link to the Kickstarter and click on that. Check out the book. It looks awesome. I'm really excited about this cover C with the artist from Teen Titans Go. And thanks so much for being on the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you, fellas.